Good morning, good evening, whenever you're listening to this or looking at this video. We are back with Jason from IDC and IDG. I'm still confused about his role, but let's move on. We met before this lockdown thing started, and in between few months passed. Now this is the old normal. So
the evolving normal.
So we discussed few things that time, like how the marketers need to adopt quickly, about that completely absence of trade shows and events and seminars, and how to embrace content and etc., how the webinar can work and cannot work. What changed from now, still then to now?
I don't think it's a question of things tectonically changing, right? And I think now that we've got a bit of history with COVID, we can view the impact of, this is an exogenous event, right? This is something that fundamentally shifts the way the world operates. How that pertains to marketeers in terms of the direct impact, as well as, I think, a very large macroeconomic trend that was occurring before. So if we break it down like this, if we look at the big macroeconomic trend that was occurring prior to this, and this is across all enterprises, including the B2B tech space, and that's digital transformation, right? Digital transformation, we all know, has been occurring for quite some time, and it's moved beyond something that was very, very buzzy and not very well understood. Then it evolved into, we see this as truly a business transformation process. And now really it's a core initiative for any company that's looking to survive in the future. So if we look at business transformation in terms of, purely in terms of tech spend, and as a proof point of its maturation, we do a number of studies in IDC, and we found that in 2020, over $1.4 trillion has been dedicated to spend in digital transformation. And interestingly, when you talk about digital transformation, and this will get to our topic at hand, really we're seeing more and more that you can't talk about digital transformation without putting the customer as the prime reason for digital transformation. Okay? So, again, taking that $1.4 trillion, if we're looking at it in terms of breakdown of spend, 34% of that spend is dedicated to customer experience. The next spend of the 10 categories that we track is around marketing. So customer experience and marketing, as you're very well aware, are very, very tightly linked. Now, the other 8 categories in there obviously have ties back into customer experience, right? Spends in operations, spends in finance, spends in R&D, all link back to the customer's experience, right? You bill the customer incorrectly because your financial systems are not up to date. Well, that's going to cause a problem with the customer. You don't ship the product correctly. That's going to cause a problem with the customer. You're manufacturing your product at a price that's too high because of factory inefficiencies. Problem with the customer. So everything is customer focused. Okay. Now that's the trend that occurred, before COVID and before the world changed. COVID obviously has forced companies to look at how they interact with their customers in a very different manner, right? And I think the biggest change from COVID, and this is self-evident, really, but it's accelerated digital transformation within organizations, how they spend their money and how they prioritize, based on the fact that in the past, a company, irrespective of what type of company you are, looked at digital as a channel, right? And so you had a mix of channels, and you would create sub-segments of those channels. So digital would be a channel, traditional media would be a channel, events would be a channel. Well, what we're seeing now is the world is moving from, obviously, digital as a channel to omnidigital. And when we say omnidigital, that really is the move to everything as digital. But IDC research, we're predicting that by 2021, 65% of organizations will have shifted entirely to digital interactions with their customers. New York Times in 2020, talking about Omnidigital and everything online, came out with some numbers that showed a 20% increase in internet traffic, 27% increase in the use of social media to make certain purchasing decisions and to become aware of what was occurring in the market. So there's digital transformation and there's COVID. There's this disruptive thing called COVID that has really pushed customers to an online, omni-digital only world now. And so while I started this by saying there hasn't been a huge fundamental shift in what's really new now, it's the acceleration of everything. And this has caused some difficulties, that we were starting to see at the start of the crisis, but now are becoming increasingly apparent, right? But for this conversation, really all we're really talking about is, the customer. How do you communicate with the customer, and what's the customer's experience? And that's where the changes, I think, have really started to show.
Right. And we can go from anywhere from this topic of customer centricity and Omnidigital.
Yeah.
And we can go into data, we can do into content, but let's take a step back, because inherently it's inherently problematic for marketers to grasp this.
Yeah.
So why? Because anytime you ask any marketers that do you have buyer's journey model, and they will say yes, and when you ask, they will give you a model which is basically their sales process in reverse.
Yeah.
Right. And if you just look at it like awareness, consideration, and purchase, this is how they want to look at the customer.
Yeah.
Right. It's not how customers are buying the thing. That's a fundamental problem to solve. So is that transformation is happening? How new marketers are evolving with that concept, or it is still mostly old wine in the new bottle?
Yeah. It's definitely old wine. There is no new bottle in this case. That is, to your point, that's a very systematic, linear, almost one-off point solution sale view of how you should approach a customer. And quite honestly, it does not work anymore for a number of reasons, some of which we touched on the last conversation. First and foremost, especially through the lens of a tech B2B marketeer, your client is not one person. Right? Especially if you're selling to a large enterprise. It's up to 20 different stakeholders across multiple groups that have multiple wants, multiple fears, multiple needs, multiple views of your company, problems they need solved, questions they need answered in that minute. Some of them are further along in the journey, if you still want to view it in such a linear manner. Others are not, right? So a couple of things start to emerge there. And the first is, and really this, we could back the entire discussion up with this. It's, if you want to solve this problem and you want to move away from that strict adherence, that slavish dedication to that funnel, you have to have insight into your customer, wherever he or she may be. And insight doesn't mean you understand them from a technographic or a firmographic perspective. It really means you understand who they are, what they need, right? So at IDG, the media side of our group, we like to talk about B2I, business to individual. And the need to speak to the individual and understand it, empathetically, right? And learn and grow with the customer empathetically is due to data. You have to have insight into your customer. And insight can come from a number of different sources, as you well know, right? Once you've got that insight, your ability to provide an experience for that person and provide content and context, and to be able to create a journey that lasts, not only at the top of the funnel, so to speak, but throughout the lifetime of that customer. Okay, so no firm wants to sell to one customer and then forget about them, right? They want to constantly upsell. They want to refine how they communicate with that customer. They want to make sure that their engagement with that customer remains positive and frictionless, right? So sticking to this view is really going to hamper your efforts in the future. Now, the way you get around that, once again, going back to data, is how do you enrich your data from multiple sources? How do you figure out which data is important? How do you analyze that data? How do you utilize that data to make sure that the person you're communicating with, at any given time, is receptive to the experience they're engaging in, as well as open to and find value in the content they're consuming within that experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's stay on that point of data right now, because right now there are tectonic shift is happening in the world of marketing data. So let's talk about the options here, right? First of all, our organization got their CRM data, right? Second thing, which used to be the intent data by the cookie co-op big boys. You know the names, I'm not going to repeat that. And then comes the publication first-party data. And then also the Google's walled garden of their own stuff. So one thing for sure, that cookie is dying, right? Second option for them to shift to IP-based is drastically hampered because many people are consuming content on mobile and where there is not a chance. So, but what's the problem with the CRM data?
Okay, I will pick a firm and a data point that's not from my own backyard. Marketing Insider Group said they think up to 70% of pre-existing CRM data is either wrong or out of date or unactionable, right? So if you're a firm that's entirely reliant upon the data that sits in your current CRM system, you might be putting yourself at a disadvantage, right? So that's what we're talking about here, is the store of data that you already have within your organization. Then if we're going back to, first-party data, right? Let's call a spade right now. First-party data is going to be the key to how marketeers in the tech world begin to build out, target account programs and ABM programs. Without it, you're dead in the water. And right, third-party cookies are dead. Something like 85-90% of the browsers that internet traffic goes through will not support it anymore, right? And then you talked about IP unmasking. Well, if we want to talk about tectonic shifts that are caused by COVID, that's probably the biggest, right? Nobody works at the office. We're at your office today, but it's empty. I came from my office. We have an office that can hold 100 people. There were 4 in there today. People are consuming content and interacting with brands via mobile, via public Wi-Fi's in some cases, right? Via a variety of different devices and locations that are not necessarily linked to their company. So how do you uncover, via IP, how do you IP unmask when your customers are not behaving the way that you want them to because of COVID? So cookies are dead, IP unmasking is dying, your traditional data store that lives in the CRM system is basically going away. The one aspect of data that you really didn't talk about was a firm's own first-party data, right? How do they start to generate that? And really, that once again boils down to, how do you generate this insight through that data? By developing a very coherent and frictionless experience for your customers, at the same time providing them content and the means to educate themselves around your product, around your brand, so that they're able to give you all of this data, so that you're able to capture that. And I think that's the real challenge right now. So yeah, IP unmasking is a problem. Yeah, third-party cookies are dead. And I think firms are gradually starting to come to grips with that. But then the underlying issues around, well, how do I generate that content? How do I build out that type of experience? How do I handle that data, right? What tech do I invest in? That's going to be a very, very large problem for marketeers.
Right.